Hey boys and girls, welcome to Munro Live, and I'm here with John Policcio, and we're going to be talking a little bit about sound systems and the comparison between what you get from the current types of systems versus a software-defined type of sound system. I think this could be really kind of interesting. We've never done anything like this before at Munro, but we do know quite a bit about the sound systems and how they work on other vehicles. So John, why don't you tell us a little bit about QNX, the sound system for QNX?
Sure. This is a concept vehicle that we use to illustrate what you can do as a car maker if you start to think about sound from a software-defined point of view, as opposed to a traditional hardware-defined point of view. We don't go too deep into the mechanics of how it works in these demonstrations. This car, by the way, is what we used at CES 2025 to illustrate this to a lot of car makers. We've shopped this around the world, so we're really excited to have it here in Auburn Hills and have a chance to show this to you. But what this will do is give you a flavor of the kind of sound experiences that you can expect as an end user if you're buying a car that supports this software-defined audio. So this is everything from music reproduction that's being done in 3 dimensions, right, via Dolby Atmos, the spatial music presentation, as well as the integration of things like ADAS alerts, lane departure warnings, right, turn signals, things like that. Voice integration, and even, we don't do it in this car, but even the ability to integrate things like propulsion sound synthesis for EVs and noise reduction, engine order reduction for internal combustion engines. It's all seamlessly integrated, and we can hop in here and give you a sense of what it sounds like.
Yeah, well, one thing I was looking to hear, do you have noise cancellation as well? Because that's one thing that Tesla did well with their car. Is that part of the procedure?
It is. It's not part of this particular vehicle. Obviously, we're inside and we're not running the engine, so you won't be able to hear it. But yes, you absolutely can support noise cancellation, whether it's engine order reduction or even road noise control. Right, a lot of OEMs are doing now, where you're actually using the sound system to reduce the noise of these big tread blocks driving over the road. Certainly, all possible with software-defined audio and with QNX Sound. So I think one of the key things to understand here is that this user interface is simply a demonstration interface. It's so I can move back and forth between these different video segments, illustrate different, different types of sounds. But what I'll play for you first is just a familiarization with the car that you're in. So obviously this is a Jeep Grand Cherokee. We have done some modifications to it in terms of adding speakers to the headliner so that we can support that Dolby Atmos playback.
I see.
We, more importantly, have removed the amplifier that came with the vehicle from the factory and replaced it. And that's sort of the key benefit that you get in terms of a hardware savings, because you're doing the processing now someplace else, right? You're doing it in a zone controller, a domain controller, something like that. But the video goes into a little more detail about exactly what we did. And so maybe we'll kick off with that just to give you a sense of what it is that we're talking about here. So I'm going to go back to the beginning and we're going to play this track. So you'll listen to the sound system in the car. You'll watch on the big screen in front of us. You're sitting in QNX's state-of-the-art sound demonstration vehicle. This 2023 Jeep Grand Cherokee Summit Edition comes from the factory with an excellent Macintosh-branded sound system. 19 loudspeakers in 12 locations, driven by a 17-channel amplifier with onboard dedicated digital signal processing. For the purposes of this demonstration, we've made some changes. First, we've added 4 new loudspeakers in the headliner above each of the 4 primary vehicle seats, for a total of 23. These additional speakers support spatial 3D audio playback. In software-defined vehicles, all processing is done on a centralized system-on-a-chip, or SoC, so we no longer require dedicated digital signal processing from the factory amplifier. In this vehicle, we've removed the factory amp, and we're driving the loudspeakers with a pair of modular audio amplifiers that contain no digital signal processing, just output circuitry. Those amplifiers are connected digitally via A2B to a high-performance production automotive SoC in the rear cargo area of this vehicle, running QNX cabin software. All of the audio you're hearing in this demonstration, and all the video you're seeing on the screen in front of you, is being processed in real time via the QNX OS running on the SoC's ARM cores. Now that you understand how we've set this demo vehicle up, let's learn more about how QNX Sound enables listening experiences in the cabins of the future. So that's just a little bit of a grounding in terms of the vehicle we're sitting in, its purpose, and what we did to it to get it to this state. Any questions about any of that?
No, but I can give you a couple of statements. First off, that is about as clear as a bell as far as I'm concerned. The background music sounded, I don't know what, so I used to sing and stuff like that a long time ago, and I don't have perfect pitch, but it comes close. And when I hear sound, especially in a car, the more space I can hear between the music and whomever happens to be speaking, that tells me how good the system is. And this is, no kidding, this is pretty good. It's very good. I'm interested in hearing what else you've got going on here, but to me, so far, that was, I don't know whether it's going to show up in the video as to how crystal clear that is, but this rings like a bell.
That's great to hear. I mean, we'll play some more examples for you, some more musical examples later, but interestingly, people who know their way around music as performers tend to be both the best informed and also the harshest critic sometimes, right? Because you know what natural voice sounds like, you know what natural music sounds like. One of the big challenges you have with software-defined audio is you're essentially talking to car makers about delivering an amazing experience, but doing it in a way that they are unfamiliar with, right? Or that they're new to. And one of the big concerns is, am I going to get the same level of audio quality that I'm used to, right? From my Macintosh system, my Bose system, my Harman Kardon system. And so one of the big key points to this vehicle is being able to point out to car makers that absolutely, you're not going to lose anything quality-wise in this transition. And in fact, there's a lot of ways that we can make the sound even better.
That quality seems to appear is resonant with what I just heard. So I'm looking forward to the next thingy that you're
cool. Let's so the next piece that I'll play for you, different music bed, right? This one's a little more country, but it talks a little about the importance of sound to a driving experience or an in-vehicle experience. And it talks a little tiny bit about the evolution of where we've gone from in the last, sort of 50 years when you just listen to AM radio in the car, all the way up to some of the things that a modern sound system does. This one is actually rendered in Dolby Atmos, so you'll be hearing sounds coming from all around you. So pay attention to sort of where you hear the different things coming from. And again, as we did before, you'll watch on the screen in front of us and you'll listen through the sound system here in the car. The automotive landscape is changing rapidly. The evidence is all around us. All kinds of vehicles, whether they be EV, internal combustion, or hybrid, are moving away from previous generations of electrical architecture and moving toward platforms based on hugely capable systems on chips that can handle the computing needs of the entire vehicle. As car makers around the globe make this pivot to the new EE architecture, they're challenged to develop new sound experiences more flexibly, bring them to market more quickly, and integrate them into a complicated, centralized architecture, all while saving money and delivering amazing new ways for consumers to listen. After all, what you hear in the car is a fundamental part of the driving experience. And just like the vehicle architecture itself, the listening experience inside the car is changing rapidly. What started as simple mono signals from a radio tuner and a single speaker in the dashboard has evolved to include safety signals like chimes, ADAS alerts, Bluetooth audio for communications.
Hey, are you going to be home soon?
In-car conversation enhancement.
Mom, can we go for ice cream?
And music in stereo, surround, and even 3D spatial audio formats.
Same old story.
End users are willing to pay for great listening experiences, but only if they're cohesive, well-presented, and don't distract from the driving experience. QNX helps car makers intelligently and seamlessly manage the wide variety of sounds that make up the in-cabin listening experience in the vehicles of the future. So that gives you a sense of what we're doing in terms of being able to manage the different kinds of sounds.
Well, that's a pretty impressive. I actually closed my eyes so I could concentrate on just the sounds. And I don't believe I've heard anything quite as good as that. We used to work for Bentley and Rolls-Royce, that was a big, big, big deal for them. Especially when you got to the surround sound and stuff like that. It's hard to make that work in a little tiny box like this. So, yeah, I'm pretty. I can't find anything wrong here.
No,
but anyway,
I'm glad you like it. That's.
I'm amazed. Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Okay, so I was listening to where the sounds are coming from. So, did you define that?
We did.
Here? Oh.
We did. So we
That's
wanted,
amazing.
yes, and this is one of the advantages that you have when you're rendering sound in Dolby Atmos, right? Dolby is really, Atmos is designed to literally let people with a 3D interface put sounds anywhere in a room, right, that they want. As you just described, though, the big challenge is transposing what's happening in a very controlled environment like a recording studio control room to what's happening inside this car. Because think about it, right? There are 4 seats in this car, 5, I guess, if you count the hump seat there in the rear. They're all horrible listening locations, right? They're too close to some speakers. They're far away from other speakers. You have noise when the engine's running. Now you have engine noise to contend with. It is extremely difficult to make things sound good inside of a car. There are companies out there that do this for a living and do it very, very well. Right. So as we said in the demo, this car came with a Macintosh sound system that we improved upon in order to be able to deliver the demo that we're delivering here. But what we want to reinforce is that QNX isn't in the sound tuning business, but we're in the business of giving the sound tuners the tools they need to be able to deliver these amazing experiences.
Well, amazing is a good word. This is pretty good. Like I say, I don't know how it's going to come out on the video. But hearing sounds from that corner, this corner, over here, over there, I mean, that type of sound hasn't been around for a long time. They used to have it so that, the bass would be here and the treble would be there, and you'd hear this singer and that singer, and the guitars would be. That's kind of, this is as good as anything Dolby. And I'm pretty impressed. I am.
You talked a little bit about the depth, right? Before of the, so you can start to get sound field depth when you have a center channel speaker that you don't get if you're just relying on speakers that are mounted down here by your calves or your ankles to provide all the sound. I would say that with a software-defined system, you certainly have the opportunity to use software to wring every little bit of performance out of every speaker in the car. And so, that 4-speaker system driven by a software-defined framework will be a really, really good sounding 4-speaker system. But just like they used to say, there's no replacement for displacement, right? When you're talking about engines, to some extent, that holds true for hardware as well. So even though we're talking about software defined in the sense that the processing is all being done inside a centralized architecture somewhere, zone controller, domain controller, at the end of the day, what you still hear is speakers moving air. And so you need the right speakers in the right locations to be able to deliver the experiences, regardless of what kind of software is driving them.
Well, this is kind of like a big deal for me. I've been a fan of QNX. I didn't know too much. I didn't know anything about your sound system until just recently. But QNX, as far as an operating system for the car, is unbeatable as far as I'm concerned. So if I want to layer what you're talking about here for the sound system onto the existing operating system, is that Is that even feasible, possible, whatever?
In fact, we encourage it. One of the things that a lot of people struggle with when you're trying to integrate complicated functions like sound.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, if you think about all those sounds that we talked about, voice and noise management and safety warnings, right, and ADAS alerts and things like that,
Yeah.
they all require a tremendous amount of information from signals and sensors that are installed all over the car.
Right.
What you want is you want the sound system to be centrally located such that it has access to all of those signals and all of that information. And the way that you do that is by using an operating system or a hypervisor, right, which is the piece of software that actually manages all the operating systems and gives you access to all the computing hardware. You want all those things to be integrated together. And that's another advantage of a software-defined architecture is that now the processing that's running the sound system is sitting inside the same processor that's running all that other stuff. So you have access to all those signals. So when you're trying to do propulsion sound synthesis, you can get access to things like where the pedal is, how fast the car's going, what the yaw rate is, right? And you have the ability to use all of those things to create a propulsion sound that is engaging and dynamic and changing as you drive. What I'll do now is play you a couple of Dolby Atmos demonstration tracks, and you can get a sense just of musically what this sounds like without having to concentrate on voiceovers and learning about the system. Yeah. Let's just see what we got here. Here's one.
Let me shake it off, all the stress I've got. Right now I'm letting go, I'm gonna rock it back and forth. Let me take it off, all the brakes I got. Can't tell me nothing, no, I got me and I'm enough. Hey, can't hold me down, no. I'ma show you how I put it down, yeah. I'm strong, I'm confident. You can call me the boss. I'm strong, I'm confident. I ain't never gonna stop, yeah. I'm strong.
I mean, without a question or a doubt, this is pretty damn good. There's no question in my mind. So let me ask you a question. I know that you can, I think you told me that you can lay this over the top and integrate it with the operating system here. Can you do things separately so that you could have a controller of some sort that could make my speakers dance a little better than they do currently?
There are some
Because
OEMs,
I don't know where it is, but I have a Macintosh system, a small one, not like this, but that's what I did have. If I can find the things, the speakers and all that.
There are definitely OEMs who do it that way. I think the challenge that you run into, as we talked about a little earlier, is integration, right?
Yeah.
When you have the operating system, the hypervisor, and the sound processing all very tightly coupled together, you gain the ability to, as I said, get access to all of those signals that you need.
Yeah.
And where that becomes really important, by the way, is when you start thinking about a driving experience where you have multiple pieces of audible information coming at you at the same time. I can show you an example where, in addition to being able to do music, right, as we were just doing, in this system, I can do
Oh yeah, it comes out of your left ear.
turn indicators, right?
Yeah.
Door closed, lane departures. But the situation that you run into a lot when you're driving is that you'll get hit with 2 or 3 of those things at the same time. You have music playing, and you're rocking out, right? It's a great track that you love, and so you've got it turned up. But now you're merging onto the freeway, and there's a car in your blind spot, and so a blind spot warning goes off. You need to be able to duck or reduce the sound of the music so that blind spot warning is audible to you. Otherwise, you're going to miss it. Or conversely, a phone call is playing, and the car in front of you is stopped, and the emergency braking indicator is playing, and you need to make sure that that's not audible to the person on the far end of the phone call. The management of all of those signals together, all of which sometimes come from different operating systems, is called audio policy management. And it's another thing that car makers are starting to pay a lot of attention to, because there are so many things that you can hear. You don't want them to be distracting. You don't want them to be annoying at best, right? Or distracting at worst. When you have the operating system and the hypervisor and the sound processing all tightly knit together, the ability to manage all of those sounds in real time and with very little delay, right, very little latency, is another key advantage. And that's something that car makers are trying to come to grips with, because there are just so many different things to listen to. It's important to be able to, that everything gets a fair shake, right? Everything gets its proper place and its proper time.
Well, I really like the fact that, if you hit that, it's actually, I can hear it out of that.
Spatially rendered, yeah.
Yeah, this is pretty snappy.
There are a lot of places, you hear this a lot in China, where they talk about cars as fourth living spaces, right, or mobile living rooms. Yeah. There are a lot of people for whom the car represents the best listening experience that they have access to. Right? Not everybody has the luxury of having a room with speakers in the perfect places and the investment in the electronics. You can go and buy systems like this from a number of different manufacturers, and this just becomes where the best odds are of hearing good music for you.
Well, I've never had a car that was as good as. In fact, right now, I have the audio system turned off because. It just, it's troublesome. It bothers me. So I have it turned off. But this is kind of amazing. I'd have the system on all the time.
That's great. That's exactly what we like to hear. So, and the Macintosh people and the Dolby people, right, who helped us pull this together, will be glad to know that as well. So we enabled this. We didn't tune it, but our software is what's making it happen.
Okay, so we're out here in front of the vehicle, and what I'd like to do is get everybody's grounded with who is sitting here. So most of you know who I am, so I'm going to go straight over here to Sheridan. Can you give us a little background on like your name and what you do for QNX and things like that?
Absolutely. So yeah, thanks again for having us. And my name is Sheridan Etier. I'm VP of Engineering at QNX, focused in the areas of middleware technology. So this includes everything from graphics to audio and acoustics and many other different areas. Long time in the embedded industry and at QNX for almost 25 years now.
John, want to give us a little background?
Yeah, sure. I'm John Policcio. I'm the Global Product Marketing Director for QNX. I come out of a long history in automotive audio. I worked for a big branded supplier before I came to QNX. Been interested in sound and acoustics my whole life. I started DJing when I was 13 years old, play a couple of different instruments, and am just really excited to be here at this intersection of sound and software. And working with Sheridan and his team to tell the world about the cool stuff that they're doing.
Cool, very good. Mike?
Yep, I'm Mike Kaysen. I'm a lead electrical engineer here at Munro Associates. My background is I've had about 40 years of automotive experience doing electrical costing, and mostly in ADAS, infotainment, anything on electrical board, we've taken a look at and costed it.
That might be the best sound system I've ever heard.
So first of all, I think that's a huge compliment. Thank you for saying so. And it's
I don't give them out very
and
often.
I think our friends at Dolby and Macintosh, right, who are the principal tuners of that sound system, are going to be really happy to get that feedback. We talked about it a little bit in the car. I think that the challenge is that we really want this to be transparent. We want you to, as an end user, to not have any idea what's going on behind the scenes as we create the listening experiences that you heard. I think, there are certainly vehicles out there that are capable of providing the Atmos 3D listening experience that you heard, right? The music listening experience that you heard. I think the big difference is probably coming from the fact that, one, this experience is being delivered with less hardware, right? And I know we get into that a little bit in terms of the sophistication of the wiring and the mass that we're saving by moving all of this audio processing away from a purpose-built amplifier and into a more centralized processing unit. But more importantly, and increasingly, it's the integration with all the other types of sounds that you hear that aren't music. So, back in the day, all audio systems did was play music, right? Whether it was radio or 8 tracks or CDs, or it evolved over time. But now, as we talked about in the demo there, you have to be able to, as an audio system provider, play EV propulsion sounds and engine order reduction and road noise reduction and manage Bluetooth audio and manage ADAS alerts and safety warnings. And you have to be able to do it all cohesively so that you're not driving the occupants crazy with just this crazy cacophony of noises coming at them from every direction. So I think the difference between what you can do with a good branded system now and what you're able to do in a software-defined audio-based vehicle like this one is be able to knit all of those sounds together into a more cohesive listening experience that's going to give you what you want to hear when you want to hear it, and is going to be able to do so in a way that is invisible, seamless to the end user. So the work that we're doing together with the branded audio providers and the OEMs is really all happening behind the scenes.
Well, there's another thing that you probably don't think of, but every time we've got a component, we have a chance for failure. And the more I can move away from hard components like capacitors or resistors or whatever else is on the circuit board, basically the better off I'm going to be from a quality standpoint. So the obvious things are, the cost, the weight, but quality is another one of those things that we look at when we look at how many lines of code or how many different components are on a circuit board. These are also points of failure. So I like the idea that you can reduce things significantly, and Mike and I are going to talk a little bit about that, or Mike's going to do all the talking. And you're going to see that there are hundreds of parts that disappear, and that's a big deal, a huge deal.
And when you're replacing parts with code, if you will, you also have the opportunity to do a lot of the testing of that code. In the cloud even, right? You can do it before you actually have access to hardware. Sheridan, I don't know if you want to expound on that a little bit, but that's another huge advantage to this software-defined audio.
Yeah, and that is a big deal, because if you do have a failure of any kind, it's much easier to do a download than an OTA download, as it is to, we got to remove a board. That pisses folks off immensely. But why don't you dive in there a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is pretty much the entire automotive industry is actually moving towards software-defined vehicles. And in this case, once you have software-defined vehicles, you can actually move into software-defined audio. And it opens up a whole new layers of experience for developing new experiences, but also on how you build and develop the components in the vehicle, and actually moving towards software only. And what that allows you to do is, a lot more upfront development cycles, testing cycles that you can do. And you mentioned in the cloud, you can actually start doing this development testing in the cloud for all these different scenarios that you're going to be experiencing in the car. We've talked about all the different audio sounds that are coming in these vehicles. It's more than just playing the radio. There's critical alerts and chimes, there's noise cancellation, there's propulsion sounds, navigation prompts, phone calls, and being able to manage all these audio signals coming in all at the same time, managing the priorities, and basically how do you define the user experience and not to distract the driver. It gets really complicated with thousands of different combinations and scenarios. So if you're able to basically develop and test all this in software in the cloud, even before you get onto real hardware, you can actually make that user experience so much better.
Yeah. So Mike, you're sitting here being very quiet. What do you think of the reduction of chips and components and circuit boards and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, if you could reduce the amp, which is we're talking mostly the DSPs and the amplifier, reduce it, take it out of the amp, you make the amp very simple, very cheaply made. The question becomes, does that cost transfer over into the software, into the domain controller? Because that still has to be done. right? You're no longer doing it hardware, but is that domain controller or is that head unit, is that capable of still doing that processing? And am I seeing that cost that we see in our amps? So that's the part that we can't necessarily understand or do because we don't know what the head unit has. But we can tell you the amp definitely gets a reduced cost and a reduced savings. It just is that really transferable in the software side.
Well, actually, John talked to me a little bit in the in the car, and why don't you tell him about the little 2% thing that blew my mind?
Yeah, so I think first of all, you're absolutely right, Mike, in the sense that this is a zero-sum game, right? You need to take processing out, but then you're going to put it in someplace else. The advantage that car makers have is that as they move to these hugely capable systems on chips, right, with lots and lots of DSP cores and lots of general purpose computers, ARM cores, which is where we do all of our processing, the audio is actually occupying a very small chunk of a very large set of processing capability. Whereas in a digital amplifier, frequently those amps leave the factory pretty much maxed out, right? They're at 96, 98% capacity. So what I was telling Sandy is that in this particular example, right? So in this Grand Cherokee's been modified, right? It's not a factory amplifier anymore. We are doing 21 channels of audio processing. We're running a Dolby Atmos decoder via Android. All of that audio processing capability is running on about 2% of the ARM core capacity that's inside the SoC in this car.
And this is a Qualcomm, if I remember right, Qualcomm chip?
This is a Qualcomm
Yeah,
8295,
okay.
that's right.
So the rest of that would be handling everything else that domain controller would be done. So
and this is the thing, right? People are moving to these SoCs and they're not cheap. It's a significant amount of work to pivot and start thinking in terms of centralized controllers, right? Domain controllers or zone controllers. So car companies need to make sure that they're going to get enough value out of that investment. And one of the ways they can consider adding some value is by saving all this money that you save by having a dedicated digital signal processor inside the audio amp and use the same processor that's doing all this other stuff to be able to do audio processing as well.
And I will say that automotive, the OEMs are definitely moving towards domain controllers, zonal controllers. They're bringing a lot of stuff in-house. They are starting to follow Tesla's lead, right, on the zonal controller. Yeah. So it does fit in that they would be able to add this and save the cost on the amps.
Okay, so what we're looking at here are a few of the systems that we've taken apart, where you're going to see part of the circuit board has componentry that is for the audio system. And what Michael is going to tell you about is how many components are going to disappear if they go to the QNX, like let's call it something a little more broad, the software-defined vehicle. So Michael, can you give us a little brief on this?
Yeah, I can go through this. So we have 5 amps here. We're starting basically with a lower cost amp. It's pretty simple to our basic vehicles, all the way up to our more higher end amps that has more channels and more processing powers. So what we did here is we basically analyzed what it would cost for each one of these as it sits now. And then we removed what we consider was that could be done in your software side. So that would be the DSP, any kind of ANC input would be in there. We removed all that, some memory when it came out. That would allow you to shrink up some of these boards, taking out some real estate, right? And for our lower amp here, we came up with basically about a $30 save by removing that over to the QNX system or whatever software design system we do. All the way up to the top where we have this higher end amp, which has more processing powers, more channels. We still have to keep those channels in there, but we're removing, there's a daughter board on here that has a processor on it, and then there's a whole bunch of other components that we could remove. And we are almost like $120 saves on doing this. That would actually reduce the board down to a smaller, so this was a Cadillac amp. We assumed that Cadillac has a smaller casing, so we're using their casing. We shrunk that board down there, able to reduce the layers, number of layers, I think went down to 4 from a 6 on that one, and then remove those components to get those savings.
So does it scale? Like the savings is less for less sophisticated amplifiers
it would be, yes,
and more
yes,
for, so this has a, yeah.
This has, I think, ANC mic coined into it. It has a bigger DSP, more memory. And so these connectors are going away because we don't need those connectors anymore. Those are all being done there. So basically just half the board would be down this size.
Oh,
Well, actually,
Yeah.
there's an illustration.
Yeah, there is an
right
illustration
under
here.
So
Yeah.
what you're looking at
So
is
that's what we're moving.
that's
this
what
is
you're
the,
removing
that's the
there.
bottom.
That's the bottom.
That's the
Yep.
bottom,
This.
and then let's have a look at.
Yeah, so that's all.
Oh, so look
part
at that. You're saying that this whole
Yeah.
chunk
Almost
Yep.
by 50%.
Exactly.
Off by
Right.
50%, yes.
Yeah.
would be.
But that's
removed.
because there are so much more features that they could be done in software-defined audio.
Yeah, and what's even cooler about this is because we should probably have a look at it like that. Okay, what you're looking at is you're cutting a huge chunk out of this thing.
Yeah, these are the total components. A lot of these are going to be the small popcorn parts, the
Yeah.
resistors. But we got 212 components and 185 components for removal.
Yeah.
Well, I think
and
one of you guys has said before, any one of
you
those
just chop
can
it right
fail.
off.
Yeah,
right.
right.
There's so there's
Yeah.
there's a reliability
Yeah.
piece to this too.
Yeah,
Where
and
we
then
come-
you can see even on the
And then we go
cheaper-
to the cheaper one, right? We had to add a few things for communications because this is a simple board, but we still need a to B communication. So that was added there, and we are still removing some small components, which we have here. The ARM processor, the digital signal processor has been removed. And then we are down to only 139 and 6. So it's not as much, but we are removing that DSP out of there. We did add for the communications though.
So you did this because you're in the business of helping OEMs find ways to save money, right?
Right,
Through
correct.
through lean design.
Right.
Did any of this surprise you? Like was there like eye openers in the course of this exercise?
I wouldn't say it's a surprise. I mean, the ESP processors are pretty expensive, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me that there is a wide range. I guess it kind of correlates that the more features you put in the board, the more you can remove, the bigger the cost is. Some of that cost will be also you can reduce the housing, you can reduce the the whole stamping of it. But yeah, I don't think it was a big surprise. Not to me. I think the more surprise would be what is the actual savings, right? Because we can remove it from the amp, but how much does it cost more, if any, to put it in a head unit, that software? If I'm doing noise canceling mics, right, do I have to put more input into for those noise canceling mics into the head unit? Or can that be done through the A2B communications? That's where it gets a little more fuzzy, right?
Yeah. So how much of this is just moving money from one pocket
Exactly.
to the other?
Yeah,
but
right.
but I mean, like on
But
this
they're
one,
saving. I mean-
this is a $60 savings,
Yeah,
right?
right.
That's a chunk.
And if I only save, so if I save $50, I save $10. That's
Yeah.
still a big gain for the automotive, right?
Yep. And then you couple that with all the development efficiency,
Yeah.
right? That we were talking about. If you're building fewer of these multi-million-dollar
Oh, yeah.
software stacks.
Absolutely. I mean, the
yeah.
complexity of the amp. If I have this amp, it's probably they have 3 different amps for their different packages, premium to all the way down to base. If I can limit down to 1 amp,
Yeah, and use it across all
Across all of them.
the lines.
That's
then-
even- that's
So
that-
now it's that scalability that
yeah,
we talked
that's
about.
a better
before. Yeah.
that's a better
Yeah.
savings that we don't even put in here. So
Yeah.
Well, that sort of complexity is what every engineer tries their best to do, is how do I get rid of complexity? And if I can move to a single board, we're looking at the costing of a board based on the number of boards that might be in that particular product line like this one here. But if I can use the same board for everything, instead of having something where I've got, let's say that this is a high-end board and blah, blah, maybe 25 to 50,000 units. But if I can use that one and I can do it across the board for everything, now we're looking at 250,000, 400,000. Now you're talking big, big bucks, because now that board is going to be, if it's universal across the whole product line, that's going to make you a tremendous amount of money. Plus, the quality goes up, the weight goes down. I mean, you're looking at 50%. If I cut this in half, I've got, either I can make one small box, which would be ridiculous, but with these kinds of exercises that we do here, I cut that down, but really what I'm going to do is take 4 or 5 other things and put it into a box the same size, and wind up with, again, space claim is a big deal.
and plus if I go down to this or something similar for all my vehicles,
Yeah.
I get a volume discount. So I'll probably get
Well,
this
that
cheaper.
is exactly
You're
what I'm
gonna-
talking
you're gonna
about,
get
volume
actually
discount.
even more so.
Even more
because
so.
You're going to increase
Increase-
your volume to
Yep.
build out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just because you're going to be reusing it across
Yeah.
the board.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's even more that's possibly there.
Yeah, this is really illuminating, though.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obvious, like you said, you take $100 savings, $60
Yeah.
savings, $30 savings. You multiply it by 1 million vehicles, and you're talking about $100 million bucks. 60
Yeah.
million bucks.
And that's
Who
not
doesn't
even-
want to save 100 million
And
bucks?
that's not even counting the ED&D and software design, right? Because there is somebody putting software in there as well. That's tuning
Yeah,
that software.
that's exactly
And
right.
I think tying
and
it
that's
all-
not. There's a whole bunch of money that we can't possibly figure out here. Again, for engineering time, software time, and then just from a weight standpoint and whatnot, all these things add up, and that's what a good engineer should also have a financial hat on. What is this going to do? How do I trade this off and make sure I've made the right decision?
Yeah. Well, and I think kind of coming back to 2 points, yours on the hardware and yours Sandy, on the software. If you can simplify and standardize on the hardware, and you mentioned about software gets easier, and if you can build out a common software platform that is going to run on common hardware platform, then the OEMs can then spend more time focusing on the end customer experience, which is the value add that's actually going to drive more sales for those OEMs.
Yeah.
Now, to be clear, most of these OEMs probably do not do any development at all, right? They send out to a supplier of a spec, and they are selling them an off-the-shelf amp that they have for somebody else. Right?
Yeah.
So there is probably no possibility for them to save because it's not their product. But if they could bring it in-house, then there would be savings there.
Yeah. Well, the big thing again is you're saving money to use Rivian. I can't remember the exact numbers, but 17 ECUs down to I think it was 7 or 5 or something. I can't remember. But dropping that, okay, now I've got a whole bunch of less connectors are actually your worst enemy. They are the bane of electronics. So I now got rid of a whole bunch of componentry that I don't want anyway. I got rid of harnesses I don't need. I've got, and quite frankly, that increases my edge computing power. On and on and on. This is the way I can see us getting to a point where we have one electronics box, and everything else is kind of like run from that.
The other advantage is if you combine a lot of these functionalities that were done separately, you now have fusion. You don't have to, you don't have certain components communicating. It's all in one box. Yeah. It may drive the component to be a bigger box or a bigger place to package it, but it does save on cost and saves on connections.
And again, we're faster. There's no latency issues.
Exactly.
Yep. Now you need to be careful, right? The software sometimes needs to be safety certified, right, and able to do that. So our operating system and our hypervisor are ISO 26262 ASIL D certified, which means that you can use it as the basis for those mixed criticality systems. So as you start to move more and more functions into fewer and fewer boxes, you actually need to pay some attention to the software that's running the boxes just to make sure you're not going to have any problems.
Which is very critical when you do ADAS or anything else safety-wise. You got to have that cyber security to make sure that it's protected from.
That's right.
Yeah. So.
Well, that's one of the reasons I like QNX is because it used to be BlackBerry, and I think I mentioned I was the last guy on the planet to give up and go to an Apple phone. It was only because there was no more support, but from a security standpoint, other people with other types of phones had a problem, and that's why QNX, I didn't know about the sound system, but I do know about your operating system, and I'm pretty confident that from a security standpoint, it doesn't get much better. It doesn't get any better.
Yeah,
well, that's one of the main advantages of QNX and our operating system. We've been around for over 45 years, and we're the gold standard in foundational software, real-time safety and security. And all these zonal controllers, centralized compute that we've been talking about, all these are being basically putting in these really advanced system on a chips, where you're consolidating all this processing power into one tiny little chip the size of a postage stamp. And QNX is the fundamental operating system that's driving those next generation SoCs. And because we have that centralized role for the software architecture in the vehicle, it gives us a really unique opportunity in the case of audio and acoustics, where we can integrate our QNX Sound audio framework right into the operating system. And then so we can get those benefits of performance, low latency, security, safety, and because we're at the center of all the action inside of these processors and the audio system, where we have access to all the audio signals within the vehicle, it allows us to create that foundational audio software foundation that then all the the branded audio guys and even unbranded audio guys will then build on top of.
Well, we were looking before at these components in back of us, and these boxes, ECUs, whatever. And in most cases, about 50% of the components disappear. As we move to more consolidated system designs, we're probably going to be winding up with cost reductions that are anywhere from 40 to, what was it, other one,
120,
120, 30, yeah. That's a fairly large chunk of change. And not only that, I get space claim. Wherever those things used to be, when they're gone, they may be another box a little bit bigger, but in most cases they're the same size. But anyways, if I've got that, that also allows me place for customer features. Customer features are extremely important. So I guess the big question is how much, I guess this is going to turn in as how much is a piece of string or how long's a piece of string. But anyways, how much do you think it's going to be costing for the extra costing for the sound system?
So you mean, we talked about how much you save, right, from going from a standard system now to a new system. It's a little bit of the how long is a piece of string, right? How loud is a sound system, right? I mean, we talked about it a little bit in the car. You're still going to need speakers to move air to give you the kinds of listening experiences that you heard in the Jeep. The speakers aren't cheap necessarily. The wiring to the speakers still needs to be done. So and you still need an amplifier. It just doesn't have to be a DSP-enabled amplifier. You still need some output ICs, and those output ICs have to be able to push power to the speaker. So in that regard, you're not really saving yourself much. What you're saving, though, is the processing capability that used to be done all by itself in the amp, as Mike was saying, which is now being done inside this SoC that can do a bunch of other processing. That's one savings. The second savings is certainly wiring. You talked about it just now, and the number I always hear is like $1 per pin, right? Or something like that, in terms of what it costs an OEM to build a wiring harness. So for example, if I can move the signals to that DSP-less amplifier via A2B, which is just a nice thin 2 or 3 wire interface, versus having to send 8 analog signals through 16 twisted pairs, right? I save myself now a bunch of mass and a bunch of money, on the wiring harness. The third thing to think about, and Sheridan will go into more detail about this, is just the savings in development. It's a significant exercise to go and build an in-vehicle infotainment stack. It's $50 million, $100 million, right? I mean, OEMs throw out different numbers. To be able to do any of that more efficiently and, more importantly, more scalably from vehicle to vehicle, or even from platform to platform, represents some savings, and we've got some advantages in that area.
Yeah. Well, and I think that you're hitting on a really key point is for OEMs where they're going to have multiple vehicle lines, multiple trim lines, multiple brands all under the same OEM. Trying to be able to consolidate the hardware and the software architecture across all these brands has huge savings in efficiencies, both on the hardware development costs and the manufacturing costs, as well as the software development costs, and both on the development and testing of it. And so if you're able to have a common platform for audio that can span 5, 10, a dozen different vehicles, there are huge savings to the OEMs for that potentially might even outweigh some of the hardware wiring sort of costs.
I think even if you reduce the part number count, I mean, that's a big driver, right? If we have more part numbers, the more it costs us to manage that management system. So,
but in our non-recurring costs, NRCs are to the moon when you start fooling around with software or integration or even circuit board design. non-recurring costs, if I can attack that, that is the biggest part of your burden when you're looking at the development of any vehicle. And that's why when I was in there, I was asking a question: how much of a difference is the between 4 speakers and 21, and where would be that magic number that would make everything work? And then you said, basically the software is pretty much the same. That's a big deal. So I'm always excited to hear that I can somehow use one software to fulfill a bunch of different needs, and that's kind of what I'm looking at here.
Well, and I think that's also a big part of the value added of QNX is we've been in the automotive business for a really long time. We have all the experience and pedigree in millions of vehicles on the road and dozens of production programs, if not hundreds of production programs. So we know what it takes to build foundational software that is reusable across many different applications. And so you're right. I mean, embedded software and software for automotive is a hard business. But if you start with the right foundational software and the right architecture, then that's when you can get those economies of scale as you're building out and be able to support all these different variations.
Let's just talk about the difference between ARM and SoC. Where do you see the benefits? And we've touched on this already, but maybe we could define it a little bit tighter.
Yeah, so I mean, we've been talking about these zonal controllers and centralized compute, high performance compute, and these are all built using these system on a chips or SoCs. And the couple of the big components that go into those are the main ARM general purpose processors, as well as the digital signal processors or DSPs. There are other modules there as well. There's camera processors and graphics processors and AI engines and things like that. But ARM and DSP are quite core components of those. The DSPs are very dedicated processing, so they kind of perform one set of functionality, processing audio signals and types of signals like that. And whether it's that DSP is running inside of the smart amplifier or it's pulled out and put into one of these system on a chips, it is effectively the same DSP. But as John pointed out, these often become fully overloaded by the time you hit production of the system, or even worse, before you get to production, before you're done, you max them out. So that's one of the challenges with those. Whereas the ARM processors are a general purpose computing platform, and they have significantly more processing power in them. And one of the advantages of them is when you move from one generation of ARM processor to the next, it actually follows the Moore's law, where you're actually getting double the performance inside of that same sized SoC or same size chip. And so significantly more processing power, and the next generation you're going to have even more processing power. And because it's general purpose, the software that you write you're able to basically port it over from one generation to the next. So this is a huge advantage of working on the ARM processors. It's just so much more simple for software development, whereas a DSP, you end up having to basically rewrite the software every time you move to the next generation.
And I will say too that a lot of OEMs are now going to their own development of their zonal and controllers. They're already putting that processor in. You just now got to utilize it for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then one of the other really key advantages is software development and software running on the ARM actually also then lends itself very well to moving to the cloud and cloud simulation and what we were covering before.
And that is kind of really important. And that's kind of one of the reasons that Tesla is really, they've been the pioneer, the leader, whatever you want to call them, in moving to over-the-air OTA kinds of applications and whatnot. So this would lend itself to basically the ability to make whatever changes you need to make over the air, which I think that the number one reason people despise going to a dealership is because they have to have software reflashed or on and on and on, or A box doesn't work anymore because it's out of date because of whatever. This is a big customer satisfier to get away from that kind of a situation and move into OTA, over the air, and have cloud simulation so that all these things will perform the way the customer wants them with less dealership interference or involvement. Yeah.
I think the cloud, you can think about it two ways, right? There's definitely an advantage to end users, which you just described, right? No one wants to go and sit at the dealer for an hour while their software gets reflashed, and then, oh, as long as you're here, we'll do your brakes and your oil and, whatever else you need, right? But the other advantage to cloud is more of an advantage to the developers, right? To the OEMs.
Yeah, right.
The design cycles now are getting so fast, right? We heard a guy at a conference a month or so ago say that in order to be able to compete with the Chinese OEMs, right, Western car companies need to pull 1,000 days out of their development cycles. And the only way, whether that's a true number or not, it's your piece of string thing again, right? Yeah. But the only way that you can do that is you have to break out of this paradigm of waiting for hardware to show up before you can start doing your testing. Yeah. So what a lot of car companies are doing now, we see it particularly with things like digital cockpits, maybe more with things like audio, is they are doing that simulation and testing on digital twins of what the real systems will become. And they're doing that in the cloud. And we can do that because of ARM, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the advantage of QNX is the exact same software operating system architecture that runs in the actual system on a chip inside your vehicle. We can have that exact same software stack running in the cloud, and so that opens up a whole set of capabilities for both software development and test cycles, which the OEMs just didn't have that capability just even a few years ago. And so you talk about the OTA software updates. So that means that if there is an OTA that needs to be done for some sort of update to solve an issue, or potentially even adding more features, they can do full tests and simulations of that through thousands and thousands of iterations before that software actually gets downloaded, OTA'd onto the vehicle.
So I guess the big thing now is another tough question for you. Who's sniffing around QNX sound systems? I mean, can you talk about any of the car companies that are moving in your direction? Or do you have anything in a vehicle right now?
I think you have to start more generically and think about the car companies that are moving towards the kind of architecture that you heard Mike describe, right? That are moving towards centralized processing, domain controllers, zone controllers. And without naming names, just saying generically, right? There are certainly, I think, some European OEMs that are heading in that direction. The consolidation, right? You talked about an example where I think it was Rivian had gone from a whole bunch of small ECUs to a smaller number of larger, more sophisticated ECUs. The industry's been talking about that for a decade, and we're just now starting to see it happen. I think, as of 2025, as we sit here, 10, 15, 20% of the vehicles on the road are supporting those kinds of architectures, but 80% aren't. The good news is that is going to hockey stick upwards very quickly, because as you heard Mike say, OEMs are going in that direction. And audio is going to be along for the ride, right? Audio is going to be one of the things that you can use to enable that new architecture and get more value out of it and do some of the amazing things, that we heard in the demo. So we've just booked a win with a major Chinese OEM and a major branded provider that we're all going to work together and be able to deliver software-defined audio, as you heard, in this car. So it's starting to happen. I think honestly, we wish it would happen a little faster, right? Because it's such a huge pivot for the car makers to go in this direction. Audio is generally not a feature that's important enough to cause that pivot to happen all on its own. but definitely something we can be along for the ride with, and an end user experience that we can make better as a result.
Is that your biggest challenge, though, is trying to get the automakers to open up to do that?
Yeah, so I think you're hitting some big points. So obviously the prerequisite is you need to move towards, these zonal controllers, zonal architecture, system on a chip before you, as the prerequisite before you can move to software-defined vehicle, and then to software-defined audio. But then, part of what we're coming up against is really this is brand new territory. And when we start to engage with the audio engineers and the audio people defining these audio systems, really we're battling against the status quo. We've been building these audio systems the same way since the advent of digital signal processing for the last 30 years. This is how we've always done it, and they just don't necessarily understand the move towards software defined. And so it does take some convincing. They don't believe that it's possible. How can you take these audio processing and audio experiences from these branded suppliers that lives in this expensive box that we've been buying for 30 years from them?
Yeah, right.
How do you take that experience and convert it to software and put it into this other box? So that's that's part of the challenge, but also the beauty of what we've got here with the Jeep today is we can give you that exact same audio experience with a completely different architecture under the hood.
So there's a psychological problem that you've bumped into. I say that a lot, that whenever I get a problem from a customer, 10% technology, 90% psychology. When the expectations don't match the results, people who are firmly embedded in the old way of doing business, they physiologically cannot see the data. In other words, the brain overrules everything else. When you put them in here, they will hear noises, but they will be thinking something else. And that's where having firmly held rules and regulations is what's going to kill you. The guy who basically came up with all these theories, his name is Dr. Joel Barker. And Dr. Barker came up and said, there's a thing with people who have strongly held rules and regulations. He called it paradigm paralysis. The real psychological name is scotoma. But at the end of the day, it is what you're bumping into. When you come in and show them this, all of the knowledge that they had went back to zero. They don't know what this is. They feel frightened, and the brain goes into fight or flight. No shit, it is exactly that. As time goes by, some of these people will die or move on. Some, a very few, will kind of adapt. The ones that are the smartest or the ones that are the most capable of change. But the rest of them, you might as well talk to that pillar over there. It ain't gonna happen. So you've got something that's brand spanking new that I'm pretty impressed with. And that usually means it's going to take years to convince some of these clowns that this is the wrong way to do it. And they'll come out and, get a horse or crank in a cart. They'll get out and they'll profess that this can't work, and sooner or later software will fail or something. Who knows? But that's where you really and truly are right now. That's the big challenge, the huge challenge.
But I think there are a lot of significant market trends and things that are happening in the industry that are pushing things in that direction. And so things that we've talked about obviously the complexity of the user experience for audio. It's so much more. There's so many different audio sources and audio experiences happening in the vehicle than you had in your systems even 5 or 10 years ago. The complexity of the vehicles, adding in the features, the complexity of the software, so the need to have more advanced, software development and testing paradigms, such as being able to do this all in the cloud. These are game changing. So it's pushing the industry to to pivot to different ways of doing software. And then it's also the savings. So the complexity and trying to unify the hardware and the software platform across an entire auto manufacturer's lines of vehicles is huge. And so that's driving change. And there's people that are going to be fighting it, kicking and screaming in one area, but when you look at the industry as a whole and where the automakers are going as a whole, it's an unstoppable change.
Well, the big thing is that it's going to be either change or die, and quite frankly, everybody is all upset about the Chinese and stuff like that. Oh, they're stealing it, they're stealing that. Yeah, they are, but they're also creating, and at the end of the day, it's going to be like in the 60s, or sorry, maybe the 70s, when Japan showed up with cars that didn't need to be repaired and didn't leak oil and ran like little tops and were affordable and had high quality. Same thing's going to happen with the Chinese. They're going to show up and we're going to say, wait a minute, you can't do that because we have this spec from 1957. And okay, and people think that's funny, but you know what? Dealing with product design people, engineers and whatnot, well, we have to use a spec. Well, what does the spec say? Holy mackerel, that's so outdated, I can't believe it. Well, it was really good in 1957. That's when a lot of specs were written, 1957, because of the crash testing that they did with, with cars in the olden days. Since then, there's been a few changes to materials science and stuff like that, but they still go back to the 1957 book.
I think you see, Mike talked about people, OEMs, pulling this responsibility into their own hands, right? And you see some cases where that has gone well, and you see some cases where it's gone badly. And when it goes bad spectacularly, right? I mean, it's in the news and it's billions of dollars lost. And so, the magnitude of these programs has gotten so big that you really, even a successful development, you kind of only want to have to do it once, right? You don't want to have to, build an in-vehicle infotainment stack and get it out there and get it working and not have it be buggy and, delivering good experiences and then have to do it again a couple years later for a new program, right? You want to be able to have all of that, as much of the good stuff be scalable and reusable so that you can take what's working and have it keep working across your different models, right? Your different trim levels, your different vehicle models, your different model lines. So I think that's another, Sheridan talked about it before, and that's another advantage that's worth coming back to with this software-defined architectures, particularly software-defined audio, is that you really do only have to build the stack one time. And this has to be maintained for 15 years now, right? Used vehicles are getting older, so you have to carry the cost of maintaining that stuff for a longer period of time. You really just want to build it once, have it work, and then reuse it everywhere you can. And that's something that you can do with this kind of architecture that you can't do any other way.
Well, I think that we've definitely talked ourselves into a suitable closing. And so, John and Sheridan and Mike, I'd like to thank you very much for really a pretty interesting hour or so. I'm impressed, and the people that are watching knows I don't say that too often. So I'd like to thank you very much for all the information you've given us here today, and hopefully our friends here in North America will move quickly. Anyway, thanks for watching Munro Live, and stay tuned for more. Bye.